everybody was able to say, I told you so. Then when New Jersey came, we had gotten to that point where everybody says, okay, I'm sick of them.
There's something strange about the songs we love the most, the ones that instantly trigger memory, the ones crowds scream back word for word. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Sometimes the people who created those songs can't stand them, not because they failed, but because they worked too well. Imagine writing a track in frustration, or not even wanting it released, only for it to follow you for decades, define your career, and drown out everything else you've ever made. Tonight, we're diving into those moments, the hits that made bands famous, and quietly became the songs they wished would disappear. Let's start counting them down. Number 10, The Pretenders. Having a massive hit right out of the gate sounds like a dream scenario. For most bands, it's the goal. For The Pretenders, it was complicated. When their debut album started gaining traction, one particular song began standing out more than the rest. It was catchy, emotional, and radio-friendly. Everything a label wants. But for Chrissie Hynde, in fact, she really didn't want that song released as a single. She reportedly pushed back hard, even telling her producer that it could be released over her dead body. That's not artist drama, that's genuine resistance. For Hynde, the song didn't represent where she wanted the band to go creatively. It felt too obvious, too exposed, too defining for something that was never meant to be the statement. But labels don't operate on feelings. They operate on potential. The song went out anyway, and almost instantly it proved everyone else right. It shot straight to #1 on the UK charts and cracked the top 20 on the Billboard Hot 100. Suddenly, the song Hynde tried to block was now the song everyone associated with the band. What's interesting is that over time, her stance softened. She didn't disown it. She didn't bury it. In fact, the band continued to play it live, a lot. Not because it was her favorite, but because it had become unavoidable. And skipping it would have felt like denying people the moment they came for. That's the real tension here. Sometimes a song doesn't betray the artist, it traps them. And even when you make peace with it, that song never stops reminding you that your career was shaped by something you never wanted in the spotlight to begin with. Number 9, Evanescence. If you could go back in time and erase one decision from your early career, for Amy Lee of Evanescence, that question has a very specific answer, and it's tied to one of the band's most recognizable songs. Before Evanescence became a global name, they had a demo floating around from the year 2000. It was raw, emotional, and unmistakably early-era Evanescence. Amy Lee had already mentally moved on from that phase. She wanted the band's debut album to reflect growth and a more refined identity. Executives loved that old demo so much that they insisted on including it on the album. Amy Lee wasn't thrilled. From her perspective, it felt like being forced to freeze herself in a moment she had already outgrown. But once again, commercial instincts won out over artistic discomfort. The song exploded. It climbed into the top 10 in multiple countries and became one of the band's defining tracks, whether she liked it or not. To the audience, it was haunting and timeless. To Amy Lee, it was a reminder of a version of herself she no longer related to. That's the tricky part about success early on. When a song captures a moment of vulnerability, it doesn't age the same way the artist does. Fans stay attached to that snapshot. The artist keeps moving. Over time, Amy Lee made peace with the song's place in Evanescence's history. But that doesn't mean the frustration ever fully disappeared. It's one thing to be known for your work. It's another to be defined by something you would have left behind if you'd been given the choice. Number 8, Bon Jovi. Sometimes the biggest mistakes in music history are almost made by accident. And sometimes they're only avoided because someone in the room is brave enough to say, "You're wrong." When John Bon Jovi first heard "Livin' on a Prayer" taking shape, he wasn't impressed. In fact, he didn't even think it was good enough to make the album. To him, it just didn't feel like a hit. It didn't sound complete. It didn't click. That's when guitarist Richie Sambora stepped in. He flat out told John he was being an idiot. Not diplomatically, not gently, just honestly. Once the now iconic Talkbox intro was added, everything changed. The song transformed from something uncertain into something undeniable. Suddenly, the energy was there. The hook hit harder, the emotion landed, and the rest is history. The song shot to #1, became one of the most recognizable anthems of the 1980s, and eventually turned into one of the best-selling singles of all time. It didn't just define an era, it defined Bon Jovi's legacy. What makes this story fascinating isn't that Jon Bon Jovi hated the song forever. It's that he almost didn't believe in it at all. If that hesitation had won, the band's trajectory might have looked very different. Sometimes artists don't hate a song because it succeeded. Sometimes they hate it because they didn't trust it, and it proved them wrong in the loudest way possible. Number 7. Warrant. If you had to design the most over-the-top hair metal song imaginable, there's a strong chance you'd accidentally recreate Cherry Pie. Loud, glossy, unapologetic, it became everything people associate with late 80s rock excess. The problem is, Warrant never wanted that song to define them. The track wasn't born out of inspiration, it was born out of pressure. Just as grunge was beginning to creep in and shake the genre, Warrant's label demanded a hit fast. Lead singer Jani Lane reportedly wrote Cherry Pie in about 15 minutes, not because he loved the idea, but because he had to deliver something radio-friendly immediately. From the very beginning, the band didn't think much of it. To them, it felt silly, shallow, and far removed from the more serious songwriting they preferred. But once the song was released, none of that mattered. It exploded. Heavy rotation, constant airplay, a top 10 spot on the Billboard Hot 100, and just like that, Cherry Pie became their identity. That's where resentment crept in, even calling it a curse on his career. The irony is brutal. The song that guaranteed their place in rock history is also the one that boxed them in creatively. Instead of being remembered for their range, Warrant became shorthand for a single track, one they never truly believed in. Number 6. Beastie Boys. Parody is dangerous territory in music. When it lands, it's clever. When it doesn't, people take it completely at face value. That's exactly what happened to Beastie Boys with Fight for Your Right to Party. The song was meant as satire, a tongue-in-cheek jab at obnoxious frat boy culture. Loud, dumb, exaggerated on purpose. The problem? A massive chunk of the audience didn't get the joke at all. Instead of laughing at the stereotype, listeners embraced it. The song became a massive commercial success, but with that success came an identity crisis. The Beastie Boys started attracting fans who genuinely believed the song was an anthem. Suddenly, the band was being associated with the exact culture they were mocking. That realization hit hard. As time passed, the group grew increasingly uncomfortable with what the song represented. Their music evolved, their perspective changed, but the song refused to age with them. By the mid-1990s, they had largely dropped it from their live performances altogether. For the Beastie Boys, the issue wasn't the song's quality, it was the misunderstanding. When a joke becomes your legacy, you don't get to control how you're remembered. And that loss of control is often worse than outright failure. Number 5. Dio. Few voices in heavy metal are as instantly recognizable as Ronnie James Dio's. His influence runs deep, from fantasy-driven lyrics to the iconic devil horns gesture. When he left Black Sabbath and formed Dio in the early 80s, expectations were sky high. The album was a statement, dark, powerful, unmistakably Dio. But tucked inside was Rainbow in the Dark, a song that leaned far more toward radio-friendly territory than he was comfortable with. Synth-heavy, catchy, accessible. Too accessible. Dio reportedly hated it. So much so that he allegedly tried to destroy the master tapes to prevent it from being released. From his perspective, the song didn't align with the heavier, more mystical image he was building. It felt like compromise, and he wanted no part of it. But the tapes survived. The song was released, and predictably, it became a hit. What makes this story compelling isn't just the resistance, it's what it represents. Artists often fear dilution more than failure. To Dio, Rainbow in the Dark symbolized the industry nudging him towards something safer, something more commercial. In the end, the song earned its place in metal history anyway. Not because Dio wanted it to, but because audiences connected with it. And sometimes, that's the part artists struggle with the most. Number 4. A Flock of Seagulls. Every band has that song, the one that opens every conversation about them, whether they like it or not. For A Flock of Seagulls, that song is I Ran, So Far Away. Instantly recognizable, hugely successful, and according to the band themselves, wildly unrepresentative of their best work. From the outside, it looks like a dream hit. Massive radio play, strong chart performance, and decades of cultural relevance. But inside the band, the relationship with the song grew strained over time. Lead singer Mike Score has openly admitted that performing it for decades became exhausting. Not physically, but emotionally. The song's success pushed the band into a level of fame they weren't prepared for. Suddenly, expectations skyrocketed. Every audience wanted the same moment, the same chorus, the same nostalgia hit, night after night. Meanwhile, the rest of their catalog barely stood a chance in comparison. What bothered them most wasn't that the song was bad. It was that it overshadowed everything else. To the band, I Ran was never their strongest composition. But public opinion had already decided otherwise. That creates a strange emotional contradiction. Gratitude mixed with resentment. Pride tangled with fatigue. The song gave them a legacy, but also locked them into a single snapshot of who they were at one point in time. For a flock of seagulls, I Ran will always be special. Just not in the way fans might expect. Number 3, Paramore. Writing songs as a teenager is risky, not musically, but emotionally. Because once those lyrics are out in the world, they don't age the way people do. For Paramore, that reality hit hard with Misery Business. The song was written when Hayley Williams was just 17. It was raw, aggressive, and perfectly aligned with the pop-punk energy of the time. Fans loved it. It became the band's breakout hit and a defining anthem of their early career. But as Hayley got older, her relationship with the song changed. She began to openly criticize its lyrics, calling out the misogynistic undertones and the way it framed women in competition with each other. What once felt like emotional honesty now felt uncomfortable, even irresponsible. In 2018, Paramore made a bold decision. They stopped performing the song live. For many fans, it was shocking. Misery Business had been a staple of their shows. Its absence was noticeable. But for the band, continuing to perform it felt dishonest. Years later, they softened their stance and brought it back, selectively. Not because the song changed, but because their relationship with it matured. It's a rare example of an artist publicly evolving past their own biggest hit and choosing growth over nostalgia. Number 2, REM. Compared to the rest of their catalog, Shiny Happy People feels almost alien, bright, cheerful, unapologetically upbeat. And that's exactly why REM struggled with it. The song was intended as tongue-in-cheek, a playful experiment, not a mission statement. But audiences didn't hear irony, they heard joy, and they loved it, a little too much. As the song grew in popularity, it began defining the band's public image in a way that made lead singer Michael Stipe deeply uncomfortable. REM were known for introspection, ambiguity, and emotional depth. Shiny Happy People flattened all of that into something cartoonish. Stipe distanced himself from the song almost immediately. He refused to include it on the band's greatest hits album and avoided performing it live. While he eventually made peace with its existence, he's admitted that he remains embarrassed by how closely it became associated with the band. The issue wasn't success, it was misrepresentation. Shiny Happy People didn't fail artistically. It failed to reflect who REM actually were. And when a single song rewrites your public identity, even a hit can feel like a mistake. Number 1, Guns N' Roses. Few rock songs from the 1980s have aged as gracefully or as relentlessly as Sweet Child O' Mine. From the opening guitar riff to the final chorus, it's one of those tracks that feels permanently etched into pop culture. And yet, for Guns N' Roses, this song came with baggage almost immediately. The irony? It wasn't even meant to be anything special. Guitarist Slash has been very open about his early dislike for the track. To him, it felt soft, too sentimental, not representative of the raw, dangerous edge the band prided itself on. In fact, the iconic riff, now considered one of the greatest in rock history, started as nothing more than a finger exercise, something casual, almost disposable. But the song took on a life of its own. It became a massive hit, climbing charts, dominating radio, and eventually turning into the band's signature track. The problem was perception. For new listeners, Sweet Child O' Mine became the entry point, and often the final impression, of Guns N' Roses. That didn't sit well with a band whose catalog was far darker, heavier, and more aggressive. Over time, Slash's stance softened. He accepted the song's place in history. But that early resistance reveals something important. Sometimes artists don't hate a song because it's bad. They hate it because it doesn't tell the full story. When one track overshadows everything else you've created, it can feel like your identity has been reduced to a single moment. And that's the curse of an immortal hit. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Think about all the songs you instantly recognize. The ones that feel timeless, unforgettable, almost untouchable. Now imagine the artist behind them quietly wishing that song didn't follow them everywhere. It's a strange gap between what audiences celebrate and what creators actually feel. So I want to hear from you. Which massive hits can you think of that the artists themselves openly disliked, avoided, or even tried to bury? Drop your picks in the comments. Some of the best stories come from unexpected places. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to hit like to support the video. Share it with a fellow music fan who loves behind-the-scenes stories. And subscribe for more deep dives into fame, art, success, and the regrets that sometimes come with it.